right, welcome everyone. My name is Tiff Ho. I am the Executive Director of Foundation Beyond Belief. Thank you for joining us for the third monthly Fireside, and just a heads up, we are live streaming. So since 2009, FBB has worked with other humanists in the US and across the world in order to make an impact. Together, we have served causes related to poverty, food insecurity, water access, housing, health, education, climate disaster, and more. I know it's tough times, everyone, with the pandemic, but if you would like to support us, please donate. All you have to do is text FBB to 44321. Before we get started, I just have a couple announcements. So recently we held a fundraiser in response to Winter Storm Uri, which affected 48 states. The situation was especially dire in Texas, where 4 of our FBB board members, 2 team members, and several Beyond Belief teams are located. Freezing temperatures, widespread power outages, and damaged net pipes led to an emergency situation. This was worsened by a stop in deliveries, which caused shortages in food, water, and other necessities. But with your help, we raised more than $17,000, which allowed our BBN teams to purchase and distribute much needed supplies to help unhoused people. So thank you for all your support there. Second announcement. So with our last Fireside on food insecurity, there was so much great discussion that we went over time. To give our speakers more time this time, we are changing the Fireside panel format to a panel discussion. So I'll start by introducing each of our panelists, and they can tell you more about their organizations. Then we'll move on to the panel. Feel free to type any questions you have for the panelists into the chat box. All right, so that's it for announcements. Without further ado, let's get started. Tonight, we'll be discussing FBB's COVID-19 response, and we're joined by speakers from 2 of our Beyond Belief Network teams. These speakers are Becca Beck from the Atheist community of Polk County and Evan Clark from Atheist United. We're also joined by FBB team member Wendy, who will be speaking about our pandemic response in Ghana. Our first speaker tonight is Becca. Becca is the co-founder of ACPC and Assistant State Director of American Atheists. She got her start in impact work as a former Jehovah's Witness advocating for victims of the Watchtower. She's now a mother of 2 who's committed to ensuring that parents are engaged and able to take part in their communities. With ACPC, Becca takes part in education, activism, and community service. Becca and ACPC's dedication to creating a more equal world is inspiring, and they make up one of our most active and service-driven BNBN teams. So I will let Becca tell you more about ACPC and their response to
COVID. Where should I start? We were actually going into our second year of being a formed corporation and organization. 1 year in, COVID starts. So we were just babies, I think, when this all started. And all of the programs and things that we had started, we had to rethink and redo and restructure. So I think for us, COVID was actually a good thing because it really helped us to make sure that the foundations and structures of the programs that we have in place were easy and could be adapted in times like this. So I really don't know. I don't know, Tiff, how much do you want me to go into now? Because I know this is like a discussion. So
I mean, if you could just tell us a little bit of the overview, and I know we definitely have some questions.
Yeah.
During discussions.
Okay. So one of the things that we realized very early in our group was that most of our members are very strongly driven towards community service. There has not been a single event that we've put on for community service where we haven't had people show up. So we knew very early on that all of our members would support anything that we did to give back to the community. So all of our programs that are centered around community service are very strong and always have the best support. So that's typically what we jump to first. We have a program right now where we're giving back to homeless people and providing them hot meals on the weekends. We have another program that's aimed at children in schools in underprivileged areas to provide meals for them on the weekends, because we know that there are a lot of kids in our county that go home from school on the weekend and the last meal that they have is lunch at school and until breakfast on Monday at school. So we've been able to start a program where we send home bags of food with kids at these schools that need that extra food to go home to help feed their families. And then we also have cleanup programs that are basically just about keeping the environment clean. We have 2 highways that we've adopted that we host regular cleanups at. And those are more of a social thing I've noticed for our group. We like to go out and have fun while we're cleaning, and that's where all the talking and socializing happens. That one we had to actually shut down hard for COVID for a while, but we've actually just started again with safety precautions in place, of course. But we've realized that that was one of the things that our people really did miss the most, was the cleanups, because of the social part of it. When you're out in the community giving back, a lot of our people just get more out of it when they're with their friends. So we've tried to kind of build all of these programs around being together, which was hard with COVID because of the social distancing and quarantining and just not knowing where you could pick it up. So we really did have to sit down as a board and think about what we needed to do to keep these programs safe but still operable. And then outside of those programs, as far as COVID life, it's been mostly just trying to keep in contact with our members. It's hard because the only thing we have is Zoom now or Facebook or any of those social media outlets, but you do get burnt out on that. So right now we're trying to figure out how do we still keep in contact with them without burning them out with the Zoom meeting every week. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough time with COVID, just keeping everyone engaged. And you touched upon some of the challenges as well as some of the things that you're doing. I do want to get more into this later, but thank you for your introduction. And I'm going to give Evan a chance to just talk a little bit more about Atheist United. So Evan is the executive director of Atheist United, and he's the board chair of the Secular Student Alliance. He has a background in political consultancy and humanist entrepreneurism and is the founder and creative director of Spectrum Experience, a humanist communications company. Through his work in these organizations and also with Atheist United, Evan has empowered atheists and helped them to build thriving communities. As a BBN team, Atheist United has been active in advocacy and community service, putting words into action and helping communities in need. Evan can definitely tell you a little bit more about Atheist United. Just give us a brief introduction and that'd be great.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, Atheist United is a nonprofit atheist community group that was founded in Los Angeles in 1982. So we've been around longer than I've been alive. And it's wonderful. I got to join their organization in 2019 as their first executive director, first full-time position to really try to guide the organization. And like many organizations, I think we were excited to gear up for 2020 and hopefully maybe an administration change in 2021, and everything was looking rosy. And then this awesome pandemic came out of nowhere. So as an organization, we've been hosting local community events like a speaker series since the 1980s. That's where most of our community kind of came together. It's been very intellectual focused. We've had different service programs over the year, including highway cleanups. About 10 or 15 years ago, we did our first highway cleanup, and we currently sponsor 2 highways. If you count one of our subgroups, 3 highways in California. But one of the things we talked about when I joined was how we started to create more impactful and widespread community service programming. But there was always a bit of stagnation around it. There's a lot of us in this movement, in these communities, we don't have professional background. We haven't worked at $100 million nonprofits before that have organized these massive events before. But when COVID hit and suddenly we were all looking around trying to figure out what to do, it really helped kick us into shape a bit. So first, we just, as an emergency response, we partnered with our local sister organization, Black Skeptics of Los Angeles, which they themselves were hosting an emergency COVID relief program. They were doing direct payments to people in need with Black, queer, Indigenous identities in Los Angeles area, and we were able to raise a few $1,000s for them. And then few of our board members got together and just reached out directly to the Los Angeles Food Bank, which led to our food distribution program. What's unique about our food distribution program, though, for the past 10 years or so, we've had volunteers that have interacted with the food bank, and generally we send volunteers to them. You go pack their shelves, you go be their hard labor for them. And in this case, they were looking for more locations to host distributions, to bring the food out to the local communities. And we in Los Angeles are one of the few cities in the world with multiple atheist organizations, humanist organizations, and we rent office space from Center for Inquiry chapter. And we told the food bank, we can host one in our parking lot. And within 2 months of working with them, we were able to set up, I think, the only atheist hosted food distribution in California. And that has been a massive learning curve. So I'm sure we'll get into that as we talk more, but our first few programs were messy. We had no idea what we were doing. We were breaking rules we didn't know we were breaking, but there was such a need that it didn't matter. The food bank was excited for us to do it. We were able to give out, I think, 50 grocery packs the first time. There was 50 families we were able to feed. And the beauty of this program is it didn't cost us anything. The food bank, it has the food, they're looking for distribution partners. So we were able to slip in without having to take on massive expenses for ourselves. Our first mistake was we actually accidentally got paid food rather than free food the first time and lost a few $100s. It's not lost, we felt good to give it out. But yeah, the learning curve for us has been the efficiency of the program, how to work better with the food bank. And now we're getting to the point where after, 7 or 8 months of doing this program, we're trying to build better efficiencies. We're trying to go from 110 families to 200 families over the next few months. We recently, a few volunteers started recognizing the need for animals. And so they started purchasing dog food and cat food to give away at our distribution. And then this past month, we just approached a local dog food store and said, do you have any extra? They put us in touch with their manufacturer, and we had a car full of dog and cat food this last time. So it's really interesting. We can get into the pitfalls and the excitements of taking on a program like this. My favorite part, though, is it's the one in-person event we're able to do as a community. So we've had to cancel everything else. We're really not sure when we're going to be able to launch those again. We have had to figure out and create our own safety protocols around it. We've had to create volunteer structures around it. But I think the one thing I would communicate over and over is if you get a dedicated group of people together, it all can be done. It all can be figured out. There's really nothing that's too difficult for any of our groups to figure out. And at this point, we now rent a U-Haul truck and give out about 1,000 pounds of food every month on the third Friday. So it's what we do as a community now. Like, yeah, we host speakers and we do some cute things online here and there. But really, I think if you look at what Atheist United is as an organization, we are like mostly a food distribution company at the moment.
You definitely spoke a lot about food insecurity, and that's something that we spoke about last time during our last fireside. Definitely want to get more into this as well, some of the challenges you've mentioned and just growing out such a program. But thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Becca, for your previous introduction. I do want to move on to our final speaker, and that is Wendy. Wendy is FBB's programs director, and some of you may have gotten to know her and work with her throughout the years. She's a graduate of Yale Divinity School, where she founded a community to foster interfaith dialogue and initiatives. She worked on the Pathfinders project, which was a precursor to FBB's program in Ghana. And most recently, she and Sarah, as well as Eric, our communications manager, were instrumental in getting funding for boots on the ground in Texas during Winter Storm Uri. Wendy's compassion and service has been an asset throughout causes across the spectrum. And tonight she's going to speak a little bit more about the work she's done with FBB during the pandemic.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to focus on what FBB has been doing with our program in Ghana and our partners in Ghana. When this all started, we had two programs going, two projects going in Ghana, and both of them basically had to be shut down. Not basically, they did have to get shut down because of the pandemic. We had the vocational training program where we were had organized training for low-income young adults in Wiamoa, which is near Cape Coast in southern Ghana, where we are headquartered. And we also had a partnership with a school called SAPID, which stands for Services and Advocacy for Persons with Intellectual Disabilities. And that was a school for, they had 120 students at their school that suddenly were at home. And their parents are used to having the day where their kids are at school and when and they're off doing jobs, and suddenly they're also at home. So when this all shut down, also our vocational training program was delayed because they couldn't go in to the tailors' shops to get their training. So we are, the FBB staff who were on the ground in Ghana met with, the Ghanaian women met with the SAPID leadership and to discuss what was the best way to support the students and their families. And they decided that the best thing to do would be to deliver care packages with food and hygiene supplies to help kind of bridge the gap until the schools could get, the kids could get back into school. I think at the beginning, we underestimated how long that bridge would need to be. But once we decided to do that with SAPID, we decided to also do that for everybody in the vocational project. And so that meant we had 134 people between those two programs getting relief packages. We also, because I think that it won't be a surprise to a lot of people here that Ghana has had a much different path related to COVID than the United States has had. And they were able to open up a little bit sooner. I don't know if you can say that much of the United States shut down, but they were able to open for small gatherings, and our vocational project was able to meet because it, again, shorter periods of time. We provided PPE for them and rearranged how they were so that they could be farther apart from each other in the space, and stopped letting everyone share tools. And so they were able to get back. We still gave them the relief packages so that they could, because everything, especially the tailors, the teachers weren't getting the business that they were used to. But they were able to get back in there with safety precautions, but the schools were closed well into the fall. And we found out from the school leadership that they were providing, like, informally a place for the students to come during the day so that the parents could go, make money, do whatever they needed to do. And because the schools were officially closed by the government, the leadership, the director of the school was paying for student lunches out of pocket. So at FBB, we decided to contribute to that cause so that she wouldn't have to be using her own money to pay for that. And now the schools are reopened in Ghana. And so Now, vaccines have just reached the country this week. So we're having to monitor and make decisions on the fly, but now things are, it's a much different situation in Ghana than it is here in the United States. So we're able to, our staff, Yvonne is able to have a little bit more of a normalcy of programming at this point. The vocational students are fully back. SAPIT is open again. So it's a different situation at this point.
Thank you, Wendy. ACPC, FBB, and Atheist United have all been doing different things during COVID. I do want to get a little bit more into that. So we're just going to pull you all up here, and that way we have a few questions for you. For anyone who is here tonight, feel free to drop any questions for any of the panelists into the chat box. So my first question actually really is, you probably all have gotten this question before, but how did you get started in volunteering, and how did you get started in your organization?
Okay, I'll go first. Well, I've always just been kind of against the grain activisty, I guess. My wife is a transgender woman, so my activism actually started in the LGBT arena, activating for trans rights, which actually led to my atheism. I think I was just kind of a sleeping Christian until I realized that a lot of those fights that we were having for the trans community were direct assaults coming from religion. So that's where it started for me. I guess I like to joke that my wife dragged me into this. But and then it became a necessity to have a group in our area. The closest free thought group to us was over an hour away, give or take. Orlando traffic is pretty bad. I-4 is always under construction, so on a good day it takes an hour to get to where they were meeting. So we looked around to see if there was anything closer. There wasn't. So we were like, well, let's just start our own thing and see what happens. And here we are 2 years later. We got about, 300 people in our Facebook group that are in our county. So that's a pretty good, decent thing, accomplishment, I would think. Because when we started, we thought, well, maybe we'll get 50 people. So we were really surprised at how quickly it took off and how many people actually found us. I guess that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that a lot of people get into it for personal reasons starting out, and then it kind of transforms you, and then you just keep going. But what about you, Evan and Wendy?
I would probably have to go back to college. I mean, other than just being a naturally rebellious person, like I think most of us would identify. I went to California Lutheran University, and in California at the time, Proposition 8 was the big political fight happening. Sure, we also had Obama versus McCain, but like all of us in college were really focused on Prop 8 and how that would hurt people in our community. And so I joined the Gay Straight Alliance on campus, and we were on the streets every weekend and like protesting. And I realized that we just kept talking about religion over and over and over again. Like all the critiques of our side was always religious based. And so finally I asked, is anyone religious in this room? And everyone went around, and only like 2 out of the 10 people were religious. And I offered the idea, like, what if I created a secular club on our religious campus? Would that be of value? And that got me involved with the Secular Student Alliance. And what's been fun for me ever since, I am in most circles usually one of the most privileged, like I come from the most privileged identities of most people in most circles. And so even in secularism, I didn't realize the privilege I had of growing up in a mostly secular household. Just hearing people's stories of how much religion had impacted them negatively in intersectional ways was kind of an interesting and unique take on the value of secular communities for me. And so instead of it just being like a social group for our intellectual ideas, it became like this is a needed and safe space to grow as human beings. And that's kind of got me hooked ever since. I feel like that's the trillion-dollar question about the future of the world, is all of these secular people looking to build a better world and find community to do that, which all the research overwhelmingly says we do it through community, we do activism through community, we find meaning and value and happiness often through community. Well, what are our communities going to look like? And they don't really exist in anywhere near the size and shape of a lot of the big institutions that currently run our society. So after college, I helped found a humanist group in Ventura County, just north of Los Angeles, and no idea what I was doing, kind of modeled it after my student group, but within 2 years, we were doing like 8 events a month, and it was an absolute blast. And then politics for 5 years, and now I get a chance to actually like be a nonprofit executive director. But I really think it just got sparked by like there is a need in the world, and maybe if no one else is going to do it, you should do it.
Yeah. And I love that you just feel like there's a need out there, that you're able to meet it, and that way you can help. And I know, Becca, as you mentioned, you got into it because of LGBT with your wife, Sarah, but you kind of just kept going because you saw a need, and that seems to be the commonalities between that. And I know, Wendy, you also started out kind of trying to foster interfaith dialogue, interfaith initiatives. What made you continue to volunteer, and you landed at FBB? So
yeah, I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that I discovered the word humanism or secular humanism when I was at divinity school. But I was there because, well, when I was there, I didn't had never heard that term, but when I heard it, I realized it was described what my beliefs were. So I was like, oh, great, that's awesome. I have to echo what Evan was saying about the privilege of growing up in a secular home. I didn't really realize that until I was an adult, and until I got involved in this community. But I was, when I got to divinity school, I was really not sure if I was going to find other atheists there or not. And I did. And we decided to resurrect an organization that had been at the school, but had kind of died off, called the Left Behinds. And it now has a different name, but it's still there. And it was a great place because we not only did the atheists and the humanists and the kind of nuns of the school kind of joined our group, but we also had folks that were not from the big 5 religions join our group as well, because it was kind of a catch-all for anyone who didn't fit the other social groups. And it was really great. And we started doing all of these interfaith events, and we started, just trying to do dialogue, but we were really focused on practical things rather than discussion groups. And so that really got me into, and part of, and I don't know if anyone else, I'm sure other people have this experience when they're in higher ed, of feeling frustrated of talking about ethics and morality a lot and not then putting that into action. I was really feeling that by the end of my time there. And I can't for the life of me remember how I got involved with a refugee resettlement organization, volunteering there. I really am not sure how that, I don't remember how that came to be, but I really got involved big time with them. And so when I was coming upon graduation, it just so happened I saw in my Twitter feed, FBB was recruiting for Pathfinders Project. And I, never looked back. Here I am. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are happy to have you. You and Sarah worked really hard on the recent fundraiser, and we were able to give to BBN teams in order to help out in Texas. So thank you for that. No, I love hearing all of your stories about how you got involved, just starting out from the atheist side of things and then moving into really action and humanism. And, you know, I know you've all touched upon your programs before, but with action, we need it now more than ever with COVID. So my next question really has to do with your programs. How do you think your programs before COVID and during COVID have changed? In what ways did the programs beforehand sort of lead you into responding to this pandemic?
Yeah, let me think. I mean, it's challenging, and to be frank, like we're still changing daily to this. I really don't think anyone's come up with a perfect, elegant solution to how to build the best community through a pandemic or solve all the world's problems during a pandemic. I remember when the pandemic started, all of the Southern California group leaders in the kind of secular world, we all got together and we started doing weekly calls. And for the first 2 months, we just kept saying, like, what can we do? And we threw a bunch of ideas out and then shot down most of those ideas for how hard or how unconnected or how little resources we had or how it's just not safe. And then we'd like start the process over. So in a lot of ways, I'm amazed with how much we've been able to do. One benefit has been, again, it's terrible for the world. I know people need more money and income, but we've had a lot of volunteers with more time. And we've been able to utilize more volunteer power for different projects. So we're an organization that has traditionally never had the best bones on its volunteer side. And we've now have enough people to where we can build the foundation of a volunteer program. And so when I look at this food distribution 3 years from now, I expect it to be there because we've like laid the foundation for programs like this, and we're laying the communication channels for that to happen. So I think in the big picture, it's made us communicate a lot more. I spent all the local groups we've communicated, all of our volunteers were communicating more. It found a program or two we could really focus on, which I think we'd been missing. Usually it's one volunteer shows up, they like highway cleanups, we do a highway cleanup. And now it's just like, we have a huge program or two, we really want to funnel you into those. And that's been really successful, and it kind of keeps people focused. There's a chaos that comes from, I think, a more egalitarian organization structure sometimes. And having one in-person event a month, it's just, this is the one. If you want to volunteer and you're able, we can funnel people into that. So in some ways, we're still figuring out how it's transitioning the rest of our programs. We've had to move everything online. And we've done that, I think, as well as you can for an organization of our size and scale, but it's still tough. We notice that there's community members that don't attend anymore. We've had to do call campaigns with our members to just check in with them and see if we can follow up and if there's any needs. We have a mostly like privileged, retired white community that have more money than problems, which we've been trying to funnel into helping others. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, forgetting the side of like just the general anxiety and depression we all face trying to organize every day. I think we're doing more innovative stuff, but the energy is not the same. You can't get filled up by being in a room with 5 other volunteers the way I normally would, and we would just go for 5 hours and have 6 new programs. We've lost that. So while we've brought more people together, we're using technology more efficiently, and we have a key program or two to center things around, we've lost a lot of the other aspects that normally you build community or activism around. So mixed bag, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. And so you said, Evan, that COVID just gives people more time and people are brought together just for this.
Our community, and I should clarify, right? Like white retired communities seem to have a lot of time. They're not the frontline workers in a lot of cases. They're sitting around on their computer, asking people my age to teach them how to use their computer. And It goes, Richard's here. No, but we've done, like, it's been good to get more of their time because I think they always had the capacity to give time and we're able to utilize it more. And we're now the community they give that time to rather than kind of ignoring us in all of the options. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, we have members that have lost their jobs and are not members anymore. And we haven't heard from in a few months and we just hope they're doing okay. We have members that got COVID and like lost family members to COVID. So, and we're not structured well to handle that. So at like, if I was getting very meta, we're in a moment in time where our movement's getting organized to where we can handle programs on the scale of a Ghana program or a food distribution on our own parking lot, but we're still not to the place where we can do extremely high level support that a massive church or a local government organization is designed for. Like there's still an order of magnitude we're missing before I can like really help with people's funeral costs if they lose a family member. Like we don't have that capacity yet.
But I mean, there have been benefits of COVID,
Yes.
Unfortunately, where, like you said, maybe not all communities, but your community has brought people together just because some of their time is freed up. When you're no longer able to go out potentially, you have to find other uses for your time. So Wendy and Becca, have you found that COVID has caused people to mobilize more easily just because they have something to funnel their attention into? Or do you think it hasn't changed much since before?
For us, at first, that was definitely the case. We had a lot of people that were just dying to, get out there and do something and itching to move because we went into like hyper lockdown immediately. As soon as we knew this was a serious thing, we stopped all of our programs. And then it was, I'd say that the core programs we have now are not the core programs we had before COVID. And I don't think that we'll go back. I think that it changed the trajectory of where our group was going. We had socials and we had cleanups, and we would do fundraisers for the Hearth Foundation, which is the local school board provides food and toiletry packs for kids in transition and homeless kids in the school board. So we had lots of our members would get into those things and donate to those fundraisers and come out to the cleanups and come out to the socials. But we never really had the like, I don't want to say it was a different motivation, I think, when we came to our group members with the idea of the mobile food pantry. We joined a coalition with some other local groups, and we have a mobile food pantry. And the idea there was, we have lots of families that were struggling, that lost their jobs, that couldn't get out to a food pantry for various reasons. Some of them were because they didn't have papers, and some of them were they didn't have a car to drive there. And some of the reasons were just, it was just so much. And we just thought, we were getting a lot of phone calls, and one of our contacts said, there's just so many people that need our help. How are we going to help them? And that's where It Takes a Village was born, was out of the need to give these people help. And so we have volunteers that come out and drive routes. We have the food delivered from the food banks, and then we have people drive this food out every weekend, every week. So there's never a shortage of people that want to come and do that. And the same thing with our other programs. It was just, we're helping people that need it. We know that these people, I think we really shouldn't have been the atheist community of Polk County. We should have been the humanist community of Polk County, because I feel like that's just where our values are right now in this time. So I'm hoping that post-COVID, all of these programs will stay how they are. That's the plan. And it's just been adjusting to those safety protocols and making sure that everybody's safe and everybody's doing what they need to do. But we've had no shortage of people that want to show up and help. So now it's just figuring out how to utilize them to get the most out of that. I don't know where else to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo a lot of what you said. I think because I have this like real eagle eye view over what folks are doing all across the country in response to you know, the specific problems in their, or not problems, but, you know, obstacles in their communities. And I think what's really fascinating is that if you were to look at what the teams that are part of the Beyond Belief Network were doing in 2019, it looks so different than what's happening in 2020 and right now. There, you know, it's, both of you have mentioned how you had cleanups that went, that have come and gone and are back again. But I think that happened across the country. We had so many cleanups that were coming, that people were doing every month, every couple, you know, every 2 weeks all over the country. And I don't think there were very few of those in 2020 because that was one of the priorities shifted. We only have so much amount of time to donate. We only have so many volunteers who are able to give their time. And we need to focus on food insecurity. We need to focus on housing insecurity. And that's what people did. And so many of the teams across there, it's interesting because if you look in March, everything was canceled. I think it would be interesting to go back and look at the differences between how many people submitted events to us in February and how many people submitted in March, because it was such a drastic change. But then people took March and were like, okay, how do we do this? How do we do this safely? And people came back doing food distribution. People came back figuring out how to volunteer at their local food bank or their local shelter. So there was this real shift, and I really am hoping that focus really is maintained and really goes forward after we're able to, you know, hug each other again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a, if I could jump in, there's a history to a lot of our communities, right? Especially ones that have atheist in the name. Like, we're often created in response to the religiously privileged communities and the amount of like pressure and marginalization we feel like our community faces uniquely. And so we need to organize around that. And when it comes to easy to organize and like high visibility, like you can't really beat a highway cleanup. And so I think that's where a lot of groups start. But when there's something as on fire in your community as a pandemic, when the pain and suffering, and let's not forget, there's always been pain and suffering that I think a lot of our communities have been able to turn a blind eye to, but like everyone got impacted by these, even some of our like richest and oldest and whitest communities. Like, we suddenly are trying to find more effective ways to essentially do good and help those around us. But I mean, we're still just scratching the surface. Like, I want to say this is all positive, and I want to keep challenging us to go further. I mean, when I think about Los Angeles, I think about a homeless crisis like no other Western country in the world. Like, there is no part of LA right now that doesn't have overwhelming street homelessness that is endangering so many lives, making the virus work, et cetera. And like, we still feel very off from being like fully organized in that space, or having the resources or the allies to challenge that issue or figure out how to lobby against it for long-term solutions. And so I hate pandemics, but I love that they're pushing us to grow and learn quickly and organize differently, because the needs are great, and we have to be a part of the solutions rather than just caring about our image to those in power, so we're not continually persecuted. Like, that is one element that is still a problem in the world. We're going to keep fighting for that, but the potential of our community, the long-term success of our community, the things people like doing with their time in our community is often just helping people and reshaping society for less suffering.
Yeah, and I think that long-term commitments in these, and when people are able to see us over time, keep showing up every Sunday, showing up every Thursday, whatever the date is, and doing what we've promised that we're going to do, that also shows the world what atheists and humanists can do, and that we are not whatever boogeyman. It doesn't just have to be that sign on the highway. That long-term commitment shows so much.
Yeah, and like both of you have mentioned, there's the shift to seeing what really is needed out there. It's less about the whole religious aspect and more of the humanism aspect. And FBB also has noticed more of that, when we were facing the pandemic initially, like Wendy mentioned, there were different types of events before. And as we moved on, we started to see what are some of our BBN teams doing, including ACPC, Atheist United, and we saw that you had launched these wonderful programs kind of really quickly, mobilizing in the pandemic, and you're addressing food insecurity, you're addressing housing insecurity, a lot of the real issues. So FBB also started to move towards that, and we've been working on launching a pilot program towards that in order to better support BBN teams through monthly stipends that can help you continue to grow and scale those programs.
Yeah, and that's been helpful. We've used the grants from FBB to expand our food distribution program. It's helped a lot. We're looking forward to more in 2021. Yeah, I mean, if you look around, again, I'm one of the few local paid atheist staff in the world. And one of the things everyone tells you, they think fundraising is easy in nonprofits, one, which is annoying. But two, they think like, oh, well, I see that this food or children's nonprofit gets money from like local car dealerships and from corporate sponsorships and grants. And like, there are not many grant organizations that are looking at the secular space right now, right? We don't have the size. We've often not been around for 20 years. We're one of the oldest, and we didn't have good bookkeeping for the past 15 years, right? Like there's lots of structural things you need to do, let alone the like how our identity is treated in society when you walk in with a word like atheist or humanist or agnostic, and they don't touch religion and politics. So having a foundation beyond belief and ideally more partners that can help us get these programs off the ground is just essential. It's absolutely essential. There's not many places to get that money.
Yeah, and I think that in the past we have provided those annual grants, or each time a BBN team reaches a new level, you get a new grant. But our goal is definitely to give those grants on a more regular basis because, like you said, a lot of atheist secular organizations don't have the same kind of support that religious organizations do in terms of funding. And I definitely feel like being able to provide that monthly stipend or the monthly grant will help to expand beyond, will help other secular and atheist organizations kind of move along towards the humanism route where they can launch programs, and also to help the ones like Atheist United and ACPC to continue the programs as well.
Yeah.
Well, I know that we've kind of touched upon this a little bit, or a lot of it really, but the religious aspect of things. So traditionally, you're both moving into this field or this realm, which is traditionally very religious, addressing food insecurity, helping out. And I know ACPC is working, I believe, with a religious group. Is that Street Warriors?
Yes, we do work with Street Warriors.
Yeah. So I know Keith asked this question, and Evan, you answered a little bit of it, but have you noticed sort of a pushback from people who feel that they're not necessarily willing to take food from atheists or necessities?
Quite the opposite. And maybe this is Los Angeles. Our our parking lot that we give away the food in is in a historic Filipino town. There's maybe like 10% of the people that come up are using English as their first language. And what we found is a lot of people are taking photos of our banners and they're tickled or they're really excited. And everyone else does not care at all who you are. They need food. When we have extra food at the end of our program, if it's beyond the lines we go on the street and we put up signs that say free food and cars immediately start pulling in. And again, I just don't think anyone thinks twice. We've had ethical conversations inside about how much we promote ourselves at these programs. I think one of the critiques we have in the atheist community of religious groups and how they manage a lot of food programs is how much it's used as a mechanism for propaganda. The goal is actually to hand out Bibles. The goal is to try to save people. And it's not actually about the food and the helping of people, or at least that gets muddied. Right? Like this is obviously the critique of a lot of missionary programs, but we see this when you go to Skid Row in Los Angeles and the way people are communicating and almost holding food until you talk to them about Jesus. So our goal is to avoid that as much as possible, but there's still a question of like, well, shouldn't we market ourselves? We're here. Shouldn't we should we put a pamphlet or a sticker in every bag? And we've been having conversations about like where the ethical limits are on like what is promoting ourselves through, I think, a need, right? Like we're trying to address a human need, which is food insecurity in this situation. And like, we don't do it because Atheist United needs more marketing, right? Like we'll just go put stickers up around town if we really need to get our stickers out. And so we've been trying to find that balance, like even our banners, like we make sure we put by our tables. We want people to know who we are. We're definitely not telling anyone, we're not talking about religion in any way, shape, or form when people come up for food. But my favorite part, though, and I did mention this in the comments, is we've actually gotten new potential partners. So I got a business card this last week from a Muslim organization who has been, they're a national network of care. I forget the exact name of it, but they do food distributions and different service work all over the world. It reminds me of like Lutheran services and Catholic charities, right? Like there's these huge national and international organizations usually to build networks for doing good. And in this case, for Los Angeles, they have at least like 5 or 6 massive food distribution programs. They have 18, 20-foot trucks that they pick food up in. It's cute when we pull up at the food distribution with a little U-Haul and they have like 18-wheeler style vehicles. And we're just like, yeah, we've got this once a month little program. And they're like, we're out there every week doing massive, multi-100 person giveaways. But because we're at the food bank with a truck, they're approaching us now. They go, let's partner, let's work together. We found a local church and we're pretty sure it's a conservative, very conservative church. They were like, we give out food all the time. Like, let's partner. They might not be our first choice for a partner, but we're actually at the table for these conversations in ways that I don't think we've ever been before, just because we decided to put ourselves in the room. So, there's a classic phrase that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. That's more politics than food distribution. But I really think being at the table has proven to give us totally new connections and perspectives. And we haven't gotten any big backlash yet for big atheist banners in front of our stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's just awesome because, like you said, it is it's just a different need. It's not politics. When people need food, and if you're willing to help people who need food, you tend to partner, which Becca, you have done. You have a partnership which is with Street Warriors, and that is a religious organization. Do you feel there have been any sort of challenges? Do you think it's made things a little bit easier for you to have that? And is there any sort of pushback from donors in terms of crossing that faith line?
That one's a hard one because you never know if the pushback, if it's there, hasn't come direct. We've definitely noticed when emails have gone unreplied to or phone calls have gone unanswered. Almost like maybe if we ignore that big white elephant in the room, it'll just go away. But we can ignore that too. Like, you know, if somebody doesn't reply to an email, then I just move on down the list and email the next person and push until I get a reply. So while it's noticeable, it hasn't really caused any major problems. It hasn't really caused any major backlash. There's definitely been communication errors that could have been somebody somewhere not happy that they were delivering to the atheists. But you know, that's also part of working with big organizations and food banks that do deliveries. Wires get crossed, so we try not to really point those fingers. We have the side conversations, and well, this is the third time, and you know, like, it happens, mistakes happen, but we're just trying not to even consider those things and just look beyond it and keep going. You kind of have to. I say that because if you get that bad taste in your mouth that, well, this group didn't want to work with us, you're going to miss out on an opportunity to work with another group that will work with you. So we just kind of, it's equal opportunity kind of thing. You want to work with us? We want to work with you. And as long as there's no lines crossed, and our lines are, we are not going to preach to these people. We are not, we're giving them food. We're giving them meals, and we're providing their basic necessities with no strings attached of any kind. And as long as anybody that wants to work with us can agree to that, then they're welcome to, you know, join in and make a difference.
I actually would add on to that. We've gotten a lot of religious volunteers that I forgot about. Like, we've had the parents of some of our members show up who are extremely religious, but just like, it's a food distribution. I want to help out. And they heard through our members. So we've had people who are waiting in line for food who are religious hop in to help us pack food for 2 hours before they then get the food. Like, these opportunities just wouldn't exist if we weren't out there.
Yeah, and I know that this is sort of a different situation because it's in Ghana. I know, Wendy, you spoke a little bit about the BBN teams, but in Ghana, there's a little bit of the superstition. There's witch camps, which, you know, we've been trying to help women stay out of, or women who are already in the witch camps. Do you feel that there is an opportunity, especially during COVID, to cross those kind of lines and work with people who might be a little bit superstitious, who have in the past feared witches, so to speak?
It's impossible to operate in Ghana and not be working with people who are religious and who have superstitions. But it's been a lot of the time, what we've been able to do is find the folks where we have a lot of common ground. For example, at SAPID, you know, one of the places where the superstitions show up is people who have disabilities of some kind are believed to be cursed, or they end up getting sent to prayer camps rather than a hospital or a doctor. And so in partnering with SAPID, we have someone who, you know, an organization that doesn't hold those beliefs, and we're able to really partner on that level with them. And so it really is about finding where the common ground is in those kinds of situations. And we've had, you know, good luck finding people in the north where the camps for alleged witches are, who are working to end accusations and working to end the need for the camps. And when we start talking about what our individual beliefs are, we find they are quite different. But we have very much have a shared mission, and we can work together and do some good together.
And you all kind of discussed that it's about doing good. Do you think that the people that you are serving and helping have changed from before the pandemic to after the pandemic, where because there is greater need and you are crossing kind of these lines, you're no longer recognizing those those boundaries. Do you feel you are able to serve more people, or do you feel the people you served have changed in any way, the groups?
I think we're making a greater impact on the community. I mean, we talked about before how it's more impactful to feed a family than it is to pick up trash on the side of the road. You're literally changing a life. And we've seen like our people that started on the mobile pantry getting deliveries, we've seen how COVID has affected them. They were already in tight situations. Many of them became homeless. Many of them, are just trying to work through the system now to figure out how to, they lost their jobs, they lost their homes, they're right, from going from on the edge, because let's face it, we don't have our priorities straight in this country. Nobody's living within their means that is, where they can actually afford it. You could work 2 jobs and still not be able to afford it because the cost of living just isn't, you can't make it unless you're rich, right? So here in our county, we just had that problem already. It was already there before COVID. COVID just magnified it and made it a lot worse for a lot of people. So the impact is different. The impact is more profound. We would get people that would stop and honk and thank us for cleaning the roadways. But it's a little different when you know that the difference you're making means that a family can eat dinner tonight.
Yeah, I feel like I get to interact with the volunteers much more. Our program, we very quickly give out the food. That's the goal, get it out as quickly as possible. So we find, we do have a few regulars now. We're noticing the neighborhood is starting to pay attention that we've been doing this consistent program now, and they prep for it a little bit. But I'm noticing we're getting volunteers that are driving an hour and a half to come help out, and they're coming out consistently. They're stepping up in other parts in the organization because they found that this is their community now. They didn't find community in our speaker events. They found community in helping people. And I'm really excited because I think those are the people you can build more community around often. I think the potential of those people as volunteers is so much higher. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of growth there, and I think watching them build a complex program out of nothing, having to solve problems like, oh wait, what about pets? And then they just go solve it. Suddenly we're feeding pets every month, and oh well, people are bunching together when they collect food, and that's bad for COVID. Like, what's the solution? And immediately, like, it takes a little bit, but we come up with a solution for that. So yeah, a lot of volunteer growth is what I would say.
And Wendy, have you noticed any difference in the community and the people we're serving? Because I know FBB wasn't initially equipped to handle the pandemic. We had a vocational training program open, we had an educational program open for people with disabilities, but all of a sudden, we're providing food packages with also hand sanitizer, medicated soap, things that people really have a need for. Do you think that kind of changed the dynamic a little bit in terms of who we're serving?
Yeah, I mean, what's at that 134 people who were receiving relief packages, those were the people that were part of the programs before. But we had this fundamental change in how we were interacting with them. And in the case, and what I think what fundamentally changed about that is we went from individuals being at the school, students and individuals who were part of the program, to suddenly we were supporting them and their families every month. So it went, and we're, instead of them coming to the school and us coming to the school, our staff going to the school, we were driving care packages and leaving them on their doors. And it fundamentally just changed how those interactions were, and really change, just, the focus of what they were talking about and what their needs were. And they were coming, I think there were times where they would tell Yvonne, "Oh, actually, can we have this in the food in the package?" After the first couple of months, they were like, "Oh, this is what we really need." Like, okay, let's adjust what's in these packages. And is similar. It's a different kind of interaction because we already have these relationships in a very intimate way with these folks. And so our relationship just changed, and that's a nice thing to move forward. Now that those relationships are deeper on more levels.
Yeah, and I want to touch upon something you said where it is a change in terms of operation. Like you said, we're all of a sudden driving these packages, leaving them on people's doorsteps. There's this need for social distancing, and I know Evan and Becca, you mentioned how difficult it has been to volunteer in this sort of new normal. Do you feel any of these changes will kind of stick around just because, this is the first pandemic we've seen, but we know it's not going to be the last. So are there any plans to keep the way you're operating going forward, just as a preparation and so that you're better organized next time?
For us, I don't really see a need to change it. It operates well for the purposes of keeping everyone safe during a pandemic, but it's also just highly convenient as it is. I don't think there would, aside from once we all have a vaccine and we don't have to wear masks anymore, I don't see how we could make it any more there's nothing really to cut. The way we built our programs is just, it's very universal, I guess. It just happens to be made that way. I hope that we can make some of the things easier. I know that for meals, cooking meals, sometimes we have to limit those groups for the homeless handouts. The hot meals probably would be easier if we had more people, but we do have to keep those groups smaller because the kitchens are small. But that would be probably the only program that would need an adjustment.
I'd say I think we just want to keep expanding everything we're doing. We've gotten to the place where I think we have a program that helps the community and we're happy about it. Like discovering the need for pet food and how great that was and that we could help that. Like that was a huge, awesome discovery. We're realizing that most of the packages we create right now are really good for housed people, but not unhoused people. So we need to figure out if and how we can take what we get from the food bank and make that more accessible for, frankly, the unbelievably large unhoused population in Los Angeles. Yeah, whether we could grow, like we might need a bigger location. I mean, again, we can actually pack closer when packing food in a non-pandemic. I think that'll be wonderful. We can actually hang out and not say, go 30 feet away if you're going to drink some water in a 80-degree 5-hour day of volunteering. But yeah, honestly, I just don't really want us to go backwards. We are now a part of the community, and I think there's an expectation we're going to keep providing food and support. I do want to ask more deeper questions with it. We get a lot of meat from the food bank, and if we want to start talking about animal advocacy more, we have to address that. Is that something we're comfortable with or not? I think we're going to talk about whether we're doing it often enough or if we're doing it too much during people's working hours. Do we need to move it? So, we moved our program to a Friday because we got a lot of food from the food bank that we couldn't store. Well, if we want to store it, we need to buy storage facility. We need refrigerators, or we need refrigerated trucks. So honestly, the sky's the limit. But the deeper question is still, why is everyone hungry in the richest country in the world? So honestly, we have to get on the advocacy side too if we really, really care about this issue. Otherwise, we're just another Band-Aid solution, and we're okay with the bleeding. So anyways, I'm I'm glad we're doing this because there is such a need. I'm glad we're learning and stepping up, but I'm hopeful it leads to actually much larger and deeper conversations about the intersection of animal suffering, the intersection of like why there is homelessness and food insecurity to begin with.
Yeah, I think that what had to happen at the beginning of this pandemic was all of these groups had to figure out how to respond. And a lot of, like you two, have figured it out and now are in this place where you're ready. If a different kind of emergency happens in your community, you've got a lot of knowledge and a lot of relationships, and you've got a lot of just understanding about how this whole system works, so you can navigate it so much faster and so much more effectively when that happens again. What I'm really hoping, and what I'm wanting to do with FBB, from FBB's point of view, is help teams and groups who are just forming when the pandemic comes, starts winding down, and who weren't in the position to create these programs like you all were. How do we replicate that so that they are plugged into their communities, so that they know what the systems are, so that they know who the other people who they need to know in order to get the food, get whatever the need is, to the right people who are in the most need, and really be ready, know whatever your local hazards are. I mean, pandemic has affected the entire world, but what the specific needs in Polk County are versus the specific needs in Los Angeles are very different. So how do you know what those are and how you respond quickly? And I think that that's something that we've learned a lot this year. And now it's just about duplicating it for the folks that didn't do it this year for whatever reason, or didn't exist yet. And I think that, we can do it.
Yeah, let's give Wendy a bus tour around the country, and like, or trains. That was how they used to do it back in the day. Teach everyone.
Much prefer trains. Let's get
Yeah, trains are a little bit more comfortable than buses, I think. But yeah, I'm just really happy to see that you're all moving in this new direction. I think that Sarah mentions a good point, where things haven't changed just in the way you operate, but also in the causes that you're tackling, less highway cleanups and more food insecurity, housing insecurity, other real needs. Not to say that environmental needs aren't real, but more human-centered needs. So in doing so, you've had different types of interaction with people, and you're building deeper relationships. What do you think this means for the overall humanist community?
I could take a crack at it, I guess. I think in a lot of ways, again, getting more meta about all of these 500 to 1,000 groups around the country that identify as atheists and humanists, like most of them were organized with kind of a European humanism, and we have a lot of the issues that make society bad, like we were really good at checking religious privilege and not good at checking any of the other problems in society. So there's still ideas that come from colonization or supremacy that get into why we don't talk about capitalism, and why we don't talk about public transportation, and why we don't talk about clean water in atheist and humanist communities, even though our values would demand that we're talking about those. I've heard so few atheist and humanist communities broach the topic of animal ethics, and yet there's few issues I could think that would scream as much need for attention from a secular skeptical worldview. So yeah, I think at its best, we're meeting new people that are outside of our bubbles. Again, our community, I'm still newish, but since 1982, it's mostly represented like a retirement-aged white community in LA. And they needed community, and they needed to like organize in separation from religion, but that hasn't served the needs of most of the people in LA. LA is one of the most diverse cities in the world, and the needs of Hollywood are very different than the needs of Inglewood, and we have to we have to address a lot more. So I'm hoping that these programs can bring in new people and connect us with new people, so that we're addressing a lot more than what is traditionally considered atheism, traditionally considered humanism, because it's not. If we're going to stand by our ethics and stand by the values most of us are inspired to organize these communities around, like we got to do better.
So in Polk County, it's very conservative, red-leaning, church on every corner, sometimes two churches on every corner. It's just really deep. And so when we formed our group, we used that A letter. And we got a lot of pushback from some of our members over it. But overall, it was just that was, we have to reclaim that and show that not all atheists are the boogeyman. And so I'm hoping that this humanist movement, under the umbrella of atheism, will, at least in this area, show that we're here because we care, and we have a lot of people that want to help, and we're helping everybody. And it doesn't matter if you're an atheist or a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or whatever. If you need help and you tell me you need help, I'm gonna help you because you're a human and I'm a human. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to change the perceptions around us, because where we are, it's just, atheism is a bad thing. Atheist is a bad word, and it's really, really hard to work under that label. But I do feel like we're making differences in small pockets. So we just have to keep pushing.
I do think that we can always benefit from more relationships in more places and more people. There are going to be people who don't want to work with us. Sorry about that. Who don't want to work with us for whatever reason, because they don't like that A word. But I think it's important to keep pushing for those relationships. And I think that that's what a lot of what happened this year. And that's really exciting.
And just, if I could do one more thing, I just feel like there's consistent, I don't know if there's some social science law yet to define this, but like when you put enough creative people together for concentrated periods of time to solve problems, if they are of a certain mindset and skill, and the community is diverse enough that's working on it, like they almost always come up with novel solutions. And we need to get better at putting those people in that pressure cooker of solving solutions, and then like doing something with it and consistently keeping them in the room. Like there's a lot of drive-by humanism, it feels like, where I enter the community as an individual, I leave the community as an individual. There's no expectation that I have to solve problems with other people in this. And what we find is when you get a bunch of volunteers at a table and they get lots of time together to work on a problem, they do great stuff. So that's the value in, I think, the community side of what we do, which you can't ignore. It all intersects. Like you can't really do this in a vacuum. It has to have a support mechanism, and that is the communities and institutions behind it.
Yeah, thank you for just answering that. I know I've kept you all here for quite a bit, so I really appreciate that. I did want to make sure that everyone kind of got their questions answered. Neil, asked if you have had any pushback from atheists who do not identify as humanists, and I think you all kind of answered that a little bit, where there is pushback. from all sides, and how have you, could you just briefly tell us how you've handled that?
I usually just call Neil up because Neil's always the one in our community. But no, I'll let others answer. We flip all over with different words. We use atheist in a very broad sense in our community. We're not very like picky, pushy about it.
I don't know that we get pushback so much as sometimes we have opinions, like opinionated people when it comes to the humanist side of what our organization does. And I feel like, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But if me and my group that is showing up to do, you know, a meal handout or a food pantry handout, if you have an opinion that's negative about what I'm doing, then okay, fine, you're entitled to that opinion. But if you're not doing anything, I'm not going to take your opinion as to hold any weight, kind of thing. So for the atheists that are not humanists, great, go do what makes you happy, but don't rain on everybody else's parade. If you've got people in your group that are doing something that they're passionate about, that's you know, like, just find your own passion. That's kind of what my advice is to people that don't want to do the humanist thing.
Yeah, actions speak a lot louder than labels.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten that much pushback. I do occasionally get pushback from folks who say that all humanist and atheist organizations should be focused on separation of church and state exclusively. And I have a very similar feeling to what Becca's saying. I'm like, okay, go do that. We're going to work on this. And that's, I think, the best way to handle that. That's the best I found. I'd rather focus on doing the work than getting into that argument, and go and do that work. That's great. I think the bigger pushback that I get is sometimes atheist identified folks who don't necessarily call themselves humanists, who don't want to work with alongside religious volunteers, and they want to do the work, but they don't necessarily want to be at the food bank next to the Christian church or from down the street. And I think that there are compromises there that you can find ways, talking about why we're working alongside those people, or figuring out ways that they can volunteer so they don't have to necessarily stand right next to the people that they don't want to be standing right next to. But by and large, that has not been a huge issue that I've encountered.
And we should have resources for those people, like recovering from religion groups, to where they can get what they need to address why they can't stand next to a religious person to help feed another person.
Exactly.
I'm more concerned about that, because now, again, if we have a strong critique about how like that church or synagogue is like blowing money on things they shouldn't, like, okay, we can find ways to make that critique as well. But if we're going to exist in a pluralistic and cosmopolitan society, like I can't avoid working with religious people if I want to do good.
Yeah,
I mean,
that big yet.
You know, pre-COVID, we had all these programs in mind. We were gonna, you know, we had members that wanted to do activism, and we had members that wanted to do more community service-based things. And I think as group leaders, you have to kind of have a handle on what your group dynamic is and who wants to do what. And once we're out of COVID and we can go back to normal, it will be a lot easier to like ping pong those people who don't want to do the community service and the humanist thing into more productive outlets for themselves that they can be passionate about. But right now, it's kind of like we've all just got to focus on getting through this the best way we can, which is taking care of each other.
I think that kind of leads into the other question that maybe Tiff's about to ask.
Yeah. No, I mean, like you said, Becca, we need to get through this with COVID. But we know that COVID is exacerbating previous issues, but there's also going to be some long-term questions or long-term effects. And so Claire actually had a question about that. Do you feel like there's something that is missing from dealing with the consequences? How can we really overcome that and do better in the future?
I'll try to talk about one. I feel like there's 100 things we could talk about here, but I think loneliness might be like, I think our society is extremely poorly designed in that, like, when it comes from our public transportation systems to our housing structure, to like, we have an epidemic of kind of mental illness and loneliness attached to a pandemic because of the structure of our society. Like the fact we don't have ways to support our community more easily is endlessly frustrating to me. Like I have not seen any church or atheist organization that has been able to address this need more directly. And that is absolutely killing me, is that we can't, like we don't have good systems to deal with the kind of emotional and mental needs of a pandemic. And I like know we should be doing better. I feel that we should be doing better. I feel like we're a bunch of smart people that can put our heads together, and the best we've come up with is like a care package. And that's, I don't know. I don't have the solution. I really, really want the answer. It feels like it might be just a redesign of our cities, which, that's cheap. But yeah, like I don't know how unemployed young person with anxiety and depression, or an old person with anxiety and like gets through this better. There's a few with really great support mechanisms, or a family they live with, or their in-home gym, or whatever it is, that really only can come from money. So maybe it's a much larger issue about inequality in our society, probably as well. But I'm like, I have not come up with any solutions for this that's any communities even thrown like really good ideas at. And we're watching churches struggle with this just as much as us. They don't have people attending their meetings the same. They've lost track of people. People can't get out of bed even when they're not sick. And what are we doing about it? So I don't know how to make it better, but
I'll just add that I think like the thing that immediately came to mind for me is also, it's not just a COVID thing. It's that we have the, when we want to, we have the desire to go and do what we can to make the world a better place. And we don't really know how to do that. I'm talking we on a very broad sense. And so we help the people that are closest to us, who look the most like us, and rather than trying to find where the greatest need is, because it's easier. And so I think that has been exacerbated in COVID as well. And so like, the people incarcerated people are being affected by COVID at outrageous rates, because they are already oppressed and don't have the same rights as other folks, and et cetera. I don't need to get into all of it right in this moment, but that's not something that's just COVID. It's just we can see it because of COVID, and we're not even seeing it that well, and we could see it better.
Yeah, it's like the COVID is just the flashlight that has lit up all the problems that have already always been there. And the infrastructure in this country just sucks for something like this. And not that it's better anywhere else, but it is better in a lot of places, which is really depressing when you really think about it. So to do better, and for post-COVID, Evan hit the nail on the head. There's not an answer. I don't think any of us, for as much as we do and as many new ideas we've come up with, this problem is just so much bigger than all of us that there's not an easy fix, unfortunately.
Yeah. Top to bottom, redesign, start over, fresh start.
Yeah, burn it down.
Yeah, I think you all said it well. There's not really an easy fix to any of this, but the first step is to get volunteering, to put your foot in the door. So I dropped all the links to ACPC, Atheist United, and Foundation Beyond Belief in the chat box. I know we could go on forever on this topic, as we segue into new topics as well. But I know we're coming up on time, so I just want to ask one last question, give you all a chance to talk about what's next for all your organizations.
Survive the pandemic. We've been launching a lot of new programs. We've been focusing on what we can launch and accomplish during a pandemic. So, like, we just rolled out a program called Atheist Street Pirates, where we go clean religious propaganda off of highway signs. And if we can, we're going to dress up as pirates and do it. But you notice there's always those Jesus save signs that they put up illegally, and nobody ever takes them down. Occasionally we've reported them to Caltrans, and we've just decided we're going to get a team of people together that's just going to go take those down. It's just kind of a cute, fun thing that we can do and not be near other people. We'll get into podcasting and some other stuff, but what I really am honestly planning for is when we can all get back together. So we're starting to plan a big winter solstice gala, maybe like a big, big 20s party to celebrate kind of us coming out of this. I don't know, but there's so much work to be done. I mean, if we don't hit herd immunity because people aren't taking vaccines, we have to address that in our communities. And if these variants continue and we can't get universal mask use, and we're then in endless pandemic world. So I don't know. There's a lot of cautious optimism about where we're heading right now, and hopefully we can get back to some big stuff. I mean, we want to start fundraising and do in-person things again. We're trying to plan like a camping trip to Death Valley to look at the stars together. But I don't know. Keep on keeping on is the answer.
Now I guess we want to do Street Pirates.
Or
whatever you call it.
I'll put a link in the chat.
Keith's in agreement. He's one of my board members. Okay. So for us, grow our programs. I think that's our biggest thing right now. We want to double our backpack program for our kids within the year. I think we talked at the last board meeting. We're looking at ways to do that and make it cost effective. And just keep feeding people that need food and just growing those programs to get as many people help as we can. And we're very fortunate. Our board is a bunch of passionate people, and we've all got our pet projects, and it's just kind of just keep doing it. Eventually we want to have a community garden and a community center where we can host all of this stuff and have it on our own property instead of borrowing the UU's parking lot. But for now, it's just kind of let's see our way out of this and grow these programs as we can, and just keep on keeping on.
Yeah, so we've got lots of big plans in the works at FBB. Tiff mentioned how we're really working on really laser focusing in on supporting teams in the Beyond Belief Network to support housing and food insecurity as it is with resources and money. And so we're really working on that, wanting to work with helping teams be ready to address disasters and emergencies in their communities, like what we just saw in Texas, and be ready to jump when that happens and be ready ahead of time. And I do just want to, we're really working hard on getting a lot of folks engaged and getting resources out to people to participate in Secular Week of Action, which is going to be in, it starts on April 30th. And the next Fireside Chat in exactly 1 month from right this minute is going to be all about ways to engage the Secular Week of Action and do events in your communities. So we're working on putting that stuff together to get out to folks to really have an impact in their communities. So that's what we're working on.
Thank you. I'm really excited just to see where we're all going. FBB also, I know I have a little bit more of an internal eye on that, but super excited. Thank you so much for joining us. I know there's so much great work to be done. If you want to donate to either Atheist United or ACPC, I dropped the links in the chat. You can go back. If you weren't able to tune in tonight, we do have these videos up on YouTube. We have them up on Facebook. Or if you were here tonight, you can just go back and rewatch it if you do want to. Once again, thank you so much. Again, I know I've said it a million times, but there's so much work to be done. And the one thing that all this work really requires is funding. So if you want to donate to Atheist United and ACPC, links are there. FBB, it's you text FBB to 4432. So thanks again, and I hope to see some of you at the next Fireside.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.